welcome to Year 11 Studies, and this is today an introduction to what you'll be doing when you start your Year 11 Studies. So what we're going to look at to start with, before we go into the details of this unit, we're just going to give a very brief and very broad overview of what it is you're actually going to be covering in our unit, and also what you're going to be covering in Year 11 at high school. So far, what you're going to expect is something a little bit different. And obviously it will be a step up, but we're going to go through each thing that is going to happen and the kinds of adjustments that you'll have to make to certain pieces of writing that you do, and also to the language, the themes, every other idea that you have to do in terms of your essays, your creative writing, newspaper articles, interviews, any other text type that you'll be asked to write about in a Year 11 or a Year 12 exam paper or an assignment. So, before we start, you're nearly done. Congratulate yourself. You've got 2 years to go and you're almost there. So, this is where things get a little bit serious. This is when not only are things a bit more serious, but they become much, much harder as well. So, this is a point where you have to take English language a little bit more seriously and also get into the habit of doing independent research. Now, one of the things that teachers will often assume at this level is that you'll be doing a little bit of your own research at home, and it's certainly something that's expected of you in the outcomes. So when you start doing work in Year 11, often it's a very good idea just to do a little bit of extra work on the side, even if it just means reading some extra books. Now, the reason to do that is because when you do get into Year 12, you'll be expected to do a lot of extra reading in order to supplement your answers and your ideas with other texts and other different forms of media. So the more you can do, the more books you can read, and the more very good films that you can watch, the much easier it is to answer a Year 11 and a Year 12 response. Now, you should also be working on perfecting your writing and your analysis skills. So not only should you be writing fairly well, you should be trying to fix up some aspects of your grammar, if you can, but also fix up things such as your analysis skills, your ability to analyze techniques, all those different things. So that's the most important thing that you'll be looking at now. Okay, now let's just go through very quickly what the layout of this particular unit is all about. So each week we'll focus on at least one aspect of language and one method of writing. Now, what those two things are is we'll focus on at least one sort of grammar skill or way of writing, and the other thing is the method of writing. So in the past you might have called it a text type. It's very difficult to say that because a lot of the text types you will do will be somewhat different, and they will all split off into separate groups and subgroups. So to call them all text types is a little bit of a very narrow definition. So really we're looking at methods of writing and ways that you're able to communicate. We'll also be looking at the idea of doing some wide reading as well, which I just mentioned before, about reading some extra books. And we're going to give you a bit of direction about where you can find some really good extra books and extra materials, and what they will overall contribute to your studies. So that's what we're going to be looking at. But to start with, we're going to look at passive voice. And this is our language technique we're going to look at this week. Now, passive voice is where a voice, instead of being active, is acted upon. Okay, so what does that mean, you ask? Well, it's a very difficult thing to explain, and we're going to provide some examples in a second, which might make it a little bit clearer. But basically, a passive person, you think of someone who is passive, submissive, who is willing to have something done to them, as opposed to going out and doing it. Think of someone sitting on the couch, for instance. They're willing to watch things, to have things happening around them, but not necessarily to go up and change the channel, which is an active motion. So this is what we mean by a passive person, someone who is just letting things happen. Think of like when something happens and you aren't involved. So you're a bystander. It might be something that is used to show distance between a person and what is happening, to say that they weren't involved, and that what is being reported is what other people have said. And the other thing is, it's like you're a witness. So just pretend that when you're looking at things, that you're not a participant. You're not someone who's getting involved. You're just someone who is just on the shadows, in the background, watching. Just like in that image there. Now, passive voice is used for a couple of purposes. Four, in fact. First of all, it's when someone is unknown. For example, a letter was written to Jerome explaining the problem. Now, we don't know who Jerome well, we do know who Jerome is, but we don't know who wrote the letter. So when I say a letter was written to Jerome, that is the person who is unknown, so we have to use passive voice to say that it wasn't me, it wasn't someone else that we know about, but it was an anonymous person. It may also be an abstract idea or action. For example, Jessica was loved by her mother. So in this case, her mother isn't doing any real action here. It's just having the abstract concept of love being thrown in. Now, why that's an abstract concept instead of a verb, which love usually is, if you love something, then you are doing an action towards it, of loving it. In this case, when you say was loved, it is not as direct as what a verb would be. So that's what we're looking at when we're looking at it as was loved being something passive, is that it's an abstract thing. We can't tell for absolute sure, and it's not her mother saying, I love you. So that's the difference between love being used in an active way and love being used in a passive way. Now, next thing as well, we're going to look at is avoiding bias in making accusations. So passive voice is used when you're trying to avoid making any form of bias whatsoever. So in the course of an investigation, mistakes were made. It's not saying who made them. It's not saying why they were made. It's just saying that mistakes were made. The other thing is it may distance yourself or oneself from an event or findings. So, for example, it is said that women live longer than men. It's not saying that I think that. It is someone else who said that. Something used a lot by newspaper journalists. The same as something like this. On June the 3rd, a window was broken. So it's not saying that I broke the window or someone else broke the window. It's saying that it was broken. We don't know by who. We don't know who was involved, and we can't accuse anyone of it. And that protects us, because if we don't accuse anyone, then no one can sue us for accusing them of it and being wrong. Very easy way of looking at it. Now, next thing is you're going to be asking, well, how is passive voice different from active voice? We've been through a couple of things. But the most important thing to remember is the two are opposites, just like these two cute little kitties. One's white, one's black. So they're opposite colours. All right. Active voice is used when someone's involved and they are performing an action. So when you are either a first person or a person who is involved, or if they are talking about people who are involved. So if you're naming names, shaming people, whatever it is, if you're doing something which is direct and happening, then it is using an active voice. It is used when you are making a statement yourself or a finding. So it's saying that I found this or they found this, as in we've done it. It is to do with us. We're not the ones acting, having something act upon, we're the ones doing the acting. And it is often used to make something seem more immediate. So that is something that sort of suggests that what is happening is not something that we're sitting back and watching, but something that is really unfolding. And something that we have worked really hard to get to, or it might be just something as simple as saying that it is happening, is going on, believe in it, act upon it, do whatever you see fit. Particularly when news stories use something like that, they're trying to create an immediacy for people to feel something, to take an action, to take an effect. Anyway, that is about it for passive and active voice for now. But if you do have any other questions, make sure that you watch the video again and ask your teacher if you have any doubts. But otherwise, I will see you next time.